Hey everybody. I appreciate everybody coming on here at a very, very, very odd time for the Lost and Found bin. It's in the middle of the day, literally in the middle of the week. And I appreciate Chick,
Hey everybody.
oh, we're
I
definitely live,
appreciate
that's for
everybody.
sure. But this is the Lost and Found bin, episode 29, and I'm Sean, or I'm SNQ, and my co-host here.
Hi.
Oh,
Uh,
hey. Mm.
yep, we're having a weird timing, but it's still going to be a good show.
Right. It's a very odd so you can tell I'm off my game right now, everyone. So I appreciate everybody in the live chat. Hey Jim, hey Eric, hey Rich. I appreciate anybody who comes out on an off day like this. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate this. But I'm going to be out this weekend. It's nothing major. I just have to do some traveling. So the Lizard Ritual will be out as well as the Lost and Found bin. So it's not anything major. It's just something I got to do, and I wanted to get an episode in. So, hey, Dick, what's going on? So, what's? I know it's been only a few days, but what's been going on, chick?
I think that everybody's just been feeling we had a major Schumann resonance activity over St. Patrick's Day. And I know I was feeling it, and I know that people around me were feeling it. And I definitely saw people from the Mandela Effect research team on Twitter all mentioning it. And one of the strange things about this whiteout was the people that were very much affected by it, whether they knew it was going on or not, they all had pain in their teeth. It's almost like the frequencies were so high it like was rattling or almost like burning people's teeth. It was very strange. And one person that's in my a loved one like that's close to me that doesn't follow the Mandela effect stuff as far as I know, and isn't sure how much of it is me overreacting and how much of it is real, like that kind of mindset. I asked him, I said, well, how did your teeth feel the last couple of days? And he was like, yeah, I've heard. I was thinking about the dentist, and I was like,
That's
you're
awesome.
feeling it just like everybody else.
That's
He was
awesome.
looking at me like, how did you know? Like, my teeth were hurting, everyone on Twitter's teeth were hurting, the Mandela effect group. And I never commented on Twitter that my teeth were hurting. I literally just watched to see what everybody else was saying, and it all lined up. And I was like, yeah, you can't confabulate with each other if you don't communicate with each other about it. It's literally independently happening to all of us. So we need to see now, after we had that massive, it was a 10-hour massive spike. I believe it went over 130. Um, and it was just, there was no like gradual build up or gradual phase down. It just started at full power and ended at full power. And that's the second time this year that has happened. And I saw geo shifts come in a little bit sooner than 24 hours afterwards. So I'm expecting more to come in just because it was so drastic.
Mhm. Yeah, and I can tell you myself, what was so interesting was Sunday I had a really, really bad day. And I was quarreling with people that I care about. I was just feeling really down. Come to think about it, my teeth were hurting too. Actually, I had a specific side of my mouth hurting. Um, that's very interesting. And I kept wanting to brush my teeth, thinking like, I don't know. It was very odd. And it was um it was an odd day, and then it was like a day later, I think. It was Monday or Tuesday. No, it must have been Monday because it wasn't yesterday. I saw the Schumann reader on Twitter, and I saw that it had whited out, and I saw that everyone had started to talk about it, and then I had remembered, Sunday, how bad it was. So you saying that, it all came together so naturally. And it's like there's no doubt that not only is Emmy real, that it is tied somehow to these shifts in the Schumann resonance, and we're able to record this. And it may be an 80-20, but chick, I'm here to tell you, whenever that thing is off the chart, like happened Sunday, you feel it, and it is recorded in whatever instrument they're using to for that Schumann resonant bot. It's awesome. And when I saw that, I actually ended up going back, is what had happened. I went back to that day. actually, because I saw it on the feed, and then I clicked on it, the actual channel, or the tweet, and then I went to the account, and then I went back to Sunday to see, because I remembered I had such a bad day Sunday, and sure enough, man, it was bad. It was real bad.
Yeah, I was not feeling good at all. Like, I wasn't feeling good for like a couple of days leading up to it, and then I felt super bad. And in the midst of it, I hadn't seen the Schumann resonance reading yet, and I was just thinking that, oh no, suddenly somehow I need tons of dental work, I guess, because my teeth really hurt. Um, and then it went away, you know what I mean? So I was like, no,
Hmm.
okay, that wasn't dental work. Like, I tried drinking something really hot, something really cold to see if it was cavities or it was nerves or something. It's definitely the nerves within the teeth and the side of the face. And
Hmm.
I would bet $200 right now. You mentioned one side hurts, that it was the right side that was hurting.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe
Yep.
I should have gone higher on the bet there, but I was like, I bet a massive amount of money that it's the right side that was hurting everybody. And I think that has to do with the document, the Gateway Project, mentioning about how one side of the brain does not filter and the other side does. I bet the signal
Oh.
is coming in the side that doesn't filter and crossing over. You know, the way the left and the right hemispheres cross, and you know, if you, depending on which hand you use, you're actually using the opposite hemisphere of the brain to the hand that you're using. I'm betting that that's what's happening with the. That's why it's hurting so much more in one side rather than the other, because the other hemisphere is probably filtering the worst of it out.
Wow. Oh, I'm that's amazing. I bet that's exactly I bet that's exactly it. And that's interesting you mentioned the gateway, because I was thinking about how is, if because I'm reading that new document, by the way, everybody. I'm reading the what is it, the psychotronics or whatever. It's the other CIA document, and it's talking about specifically E equals MC squared. And I remember, the theory of relativity being, confined to this time space. However, you can, those rules don't apply when you click out in the gateway process. And the particular document, hold on, it was actually saying in the particular document that well, they have a section called expanding the concept of time, and I'll release this document when I'm ready to talk about it. I mean, it literally will be in a day or so. um, but I want to talk about it first. But it was talking about consciousness and trying to measure consciousness now. And now they know one of the reasons why relativity isn't working is that consciousness actually has weight, and it's not to the point of holding matter, but it's to the point that the reason why certain things are always off is that because we're dealing with consciousness. And this comes from the Japan Psychotronics Institute, and it was unclassified on 8/11/2000, and it's called the Psychotronic Universe. And what they're actually talking about is being in this time space and dealing with consciousness within this time space, and trying to work consciousness into these new mathematical formulas, because they're saying these formulas aren't working, and they're actually affecting science, and they're trying to call it virtual or ethereal energy. And the point I'm trying to make to tie all this together, because I know this seems pretty diluted here, is that um, what you were talking about, maybe perhaps it's coming in from that space that's outside of this time space. Perhaps these changes that are happening, whether it's CERN, whether it's, whatever these Mandela shifts are, you kind of gave me that idea because I was reading this. It's called The New Science and the New Information inside this unclassified document. Is they're coming to the realization that obviously the mind isn't actually here, but if you have these shifts that are happening, I don't think they're happening here. And you kind of alluded to that, Chick. What if the shifts are happening outside of the time space where people click out, and then it's being trickled down into this this time space, and that's the shifts. The shifts aren't, they're not, the origins of the shift aren't here. The origins of the shift are actually outside of this reality.
I would agree with that. Reading more about thought process, about reality, and everything else. If consciousness and if the shifts are coming from the click out space, and the click out space is accessible from the lower brain waves close to sleep, closer to the subconscious mind, they say that a thought occurs 7 seconds before the brain knows it does. Apparently, that's how long it takes to get from the subconscious up to the frontal lobes. So I would say, yeah, that would make sense that the bizarreness or the anomaly is happening at the subconscious level of reality and existence, and it takes that 7 seconds to get to the frontal lobes where you can consciously say, oh my gosh, what is this? What's going on? And maybe that's why people see flip-flops in real time, because it takes us a while to catch up with what's happening. And just when you were saying there about the weight of consciousness, I wanted to mention the 21 grams experiment. And if anyone wants to look that up, 21 grams experiment refers to a scientific study published in 1907. And I just thought it was an interesting idea. Physician from Massachusetts, McDougall, hypothesized that the souls have physical weight and attempted to measure the mass lost by a human when the soul departed the body. Now, that's not something that I ever heard of in like the Sagittarius arm or the reality where I grew up. But here I have heard that people lose 21 grams of weight immediately upon death.
Now,
So
that's
it's almost like that's how much your consciousness weighs and it leaves, you know what I mean?
No, that's absolutely, that makes a lot of sense, because you know if anyone, and I included the original CIA document because I'm seeing a lot of new people in the chat today. Please check out the original CIA FOIA request that's dated June 9, 1983. It's an assessment of the gateway process and the protocols that they use. And for everyone that's new here, I'm seeing a whole lot of new faces here. You know, the foundation from which we're all talking from is that we're all immersed in this particular document. So, and the document itself explains that existence and consciousness is only a concept that's created by the holographic universe, which is actually created by the mind. So the mind comes together, it creates the universe around it. The mind creates or consciousness creates the world around you. So it is we're looking at things as kind of a mind or a consciousness centric point of view. And that's something that the CIA has been using, and most of the DoD has been using for their particular purposes. But getting back to, and that's for the new guests, it's just hard to incorporate new people when we get on this, and we've been on this now for about 5 or 6 weeks, Chick, and including everybody else, that I see in here, Lanessa, Dick, everybody who's Mishka, everybody who baked and awake, everybody that I'm used to seeing, Lenny, obviously. But just real quick, talking about these things, about the 21 grams and the soul actually having a weight and everything. So I'm thinking with this 21 grams, then the soul and the consciousness are most likely one, and it's the soul and the consciousness that is actually creating the frequencies that erect the actual scaffolding that we see all around us. That's existence. But it says here, the 21st century, the era of new science and new technology. And this is from the unclassified documents that I'm reading from the Psychotronic universe. I'm actually reading it right now. And what was so interesting that knocked me out, it says, beyond modern physics, the emergence of psychotronics. And it says here, I'll just read just real quick here. Consciousness is a, quote, virtual physical quality. It's a virtual energy and is the imaginary part of the complex electromagnetic field, and thus it is virtual time space. Consciousness and the relationship between it and matter displays cataclysmic phenomena in respect of the integration of the electromagnetic and gravitational fields, and have posed difficulties in conventional physics, and are easily resolved from the standpoint of complex electromagnetic fields theory, so that an energy triangle relating to two virtual energy or ethereal energy can be derived, in the energy relationships in paranormal phenomena can be scientifically understood. So there, and also it says here, beyond modern physics, the emergence of psychotronics. In the beginning, West European philosophy, which formed the foundation of modern physics, was a reductionist, two-dimensional theory of mind and matter, which said it was possible to explain all the world's phenomena in physical and chemical terms. The main reason why modern science has now reached an impasse is that it has neglected the category of, quote, consciousness, something non existent that has to do with matter and energy. However, in recent years, Eastern philosophies have been looked at again as part of a reformulation of Western philosophy, so that, for example, they appeared in a seminar entitled Science and Consciousness, held in Cordoba, Spain in 1979. I'm amazed at how early these people knew this stuff. And now that it's declassified, we're like 30 years on, and we actually have a reductionist materialist arguing something that's 30 years old. Isn't that amazing to you, Chick? That this stuff is so out of date, their thinking, and they are so wrong that it's 1979 that scientists came to this impasse, realizing that reductionist materialism, i.e. atheism, is absolutely, it's irrelevant in terms of our modern philosophy.
It is crazy. I'm just like, I'm so confused. Well, not confused, but just surprised always at the difference, the rate of which people came to different understandings, or even the rate at which different technologies emerged. And I just think that there's a lot of very linear thinking here, but at the same time, there's a lot of bringing fiction into reality at the same time. Like they had photographic technology way more advanced than we have, and we had. And it's strange to see like people that, you know, the general population here, a lot of them are more linear literalist thinkers, not all but a lot. And it's really strange that the technology and the innovation is, it's further ahead. It's almost in some cases like copied and pasted into reality. And it's just, I don't know, it's, that whole thing is really strange to me. About, of, you know, from our point of view, we'd say, oh yeah, the literalist reductive materialist is like missing half of the picture. But it's interesting to see the people here kind of muse that, because they, a lot of them take things so literally.
Yeah, and I'm just so amazed that there's like, I'm not on Facebook, but there's entire groups that are dedicated to a philosophy that they were debunking in 1979. And it's just amazing that the literature is out here for all the public to find. And if you don't mind, there's only one more, like three more sentences. Do you mind if I read just this little piece right here?
I don't mind. No.
Okay. It says here the concept of, quote, space in which, quote, existence and, quote, non existence are irrelated was, through expressed in other words, nothing other than the existence and the functioning of a matterless ether. It has it has not been possible to explain virtual energy, and this is Perrin's energy of paranormal phenomena, by the relationship between matter and energy in conventional physics, E equals mc squared. What has been required is a reformulation and a reorganization of Western science with the inclusion of the category of, quote unquote, consciousness. And what has been born as a result of that is the new science of psychotronics. And I just wanted to give you guys a real quick glimpse into this one to make the show worth your time going on an off day like this. But also, too, I've read most of this, and it's explaining a recalculation of a lot of complex math that they have to use, and right down to a conventional energy, and how conventional energy has to be reorganized when a conscious entity is actually looking at the functioning of whenever energy is in motion, or energy is actually being used. And I'm going to have to read this a bunch of times to make sure what I'm saying is absolutely correct. But it's saying that consciousness itself is the thing that's been blocking a lot of physics and this time space. And I think it plays so well because they bring up E equals mc squared. Because if you look at the original CIA document, it talks about relativity, and they said it doesn't apply when you click out. So, anything like that kind of physics we would have on Earth, assuming it's still a sphere, if you were to leave Earth, things like gravity, that goes out the window. The same thing with whenever you leave this time space, all of that goes out the window once you get outside of this time space. And one of the more shocking and one of those odd coincidences that always seem to follow me around was they have this formula in here. It's called and it's section T, the reorganization of the thermodynamics. They call it the lizard's trail reversal of time.
Hmm.
And my show's called The Lizard Ritual. Now, I know they didn't say ritual specifically, but whenever you're talking about, the thermodynamics or anything like that, just to bring up anything about like lizards is very odd and I can't wait to read the section to see if I can find anything that has to do with what we all talk about, what we all care about is what is all this about. So that's kind of interesting.
For sure. And I do always find it interesting that like things that you were talking about early on, like even way before the Lost and Found bin, seem to line up with these documents. And it's almost like it was the right time and the right place and everything kind of lined up together. And in a non-linear fashion, you had that understanding because you knew years before you read it what you were talking about.
It's very odd, isn't it? I must say, if there was ever a time where our subconscious can go to a point of superposition, which is kind of the language I adopted when I didn't have the language of clicking out, you certainly would be able to see, as said in the CIA document, the concept of a past, a present, and a future is absolutely irrelevant, and it doesn't exist, and that it in itself is one of the great illusions that we all live under, and delusions for that matter, that we all live under. And a lot of these things that we have talked about, they're not only being talked about in these documents, they're actually taking it farther than we even took it. So it's really amazing. It's just so interesting, and so I'm so excited. I'm happy about all this stuff, and I just still feel as if I think, like you said, the timing was right, and I think for whatever reason it is, I think the time needs to be now that we all know these things, and whatever population we are being MEs, for some reason we're either being allowed or we're being encouraged to read this kind of literature because it's already in our consciousness, regardless of how it got here. And even even if it is an organization that a lot of people are suspicious of, a lot of what is said we've already talked about, just you and I, Chick, and I've talked about, and we've talked about in the chat so many times, and also on Twitter and just emails, and it's all falling into place as far as I'm concerned.
It is, and I think that kind of the more people just, I don't want to say take it to heart, but like take it in the frontal part of their consciousness, the everyday, not so deep part of how they deal with reality. I think that will kind of stir the memories within of times when your life has not been linearly in sync in time. I know for me, that's been happening a lot at different points where I realized that things I did in what would have been the future at that point actually affected the past, which was the present at that point. Like I'm seeing different times in my life where somehow I influenced myself in directions of time that were supposedly impossible. And I think that that's probably something that happens for Mandela affected people. It's just very difficult to explain because the language is still forming around that, because we've been told so many things. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that we've been told seem to be either backwards or incomplete. So, and it's not, I don't think it's through a fault of anyone. I think that it was just literally, there was things that were not known widely until this time. And right now things are just lining up and we're supposed to know at this time.
And yeah, absolutely. And I think the way that we are being affected, I think there's something about this that it's so deep and it's so profound. I think the releasing of the documents now, if you were to take this space time in a linear, which we have to now, that's how we experience it. There needed to be this release of these documents in order for people, because eventually I just have a feeling they're going to get a hold of the documents. They're going to reach either this channel or someone will be spreading around the documents or whatever. but they're going to get the documents, and it's going to calm them and help them understand the way in which reality actually is functioning and really where science actually is. And you've realized that modern science is going back to the drawing board. And they were doing it as late as 1979 while letting the mainstream sort of popular idea of science go on with the facade of they've gotten everything figured out. When actually they're going back so deep to the drawing board that they're trying to, I mean, half of the psychotronic document in the very beginning is mathematical formulas where they're trying to recalculate thermodynamic formulas and formulas for combustion, for energy combustion, because they change whenever consciousness is around it. You know, any kind of energy changes once you get, I assume, specifically human consciousness around it, and that it actually changes the energy levels and actually how the particular subatomic particles work. And they're having to rearrange some of these or tweak some of these mathematical calculations in order to get these things to work. Now, that too could lean itself towards the Mandela effect being a man-made. Now, I am still sticking with I think the Mandela effect so far is natural. However, if the Mandela effect would be something that is man-made, it would be something where they've realized somewhere in a superposition that there is weight, so to speak, quote weight to consciousness. There is something real about consciousness, something bona fide about it. And what they had to do was retroactively change a lot of things and create new sciences almost on the fly once they've come to this. And they even if you take it, say, fine, I'm just going to stick with the linear concept of time, and I'm going to ignore the document from 1983. This document alone is saying that they knew they were coming to a formula impasse, and that the impasse in mathematics and energy and all these other things was because they always discounted consciousness, and that was a shortcoming of Western European philosophy. And I love that the language they used was the language I use, reductionist, where you try to reduce things to a bumper sticker, and you can't reduce existence in the universe to a bumper sticker. And what is it, like I love atheism, or whatever those organizations are, and it's like you're just ignorant of, and so was I up until I read that we were just ignorant of where the real cutting edge science was actually moving. It's so beyond that now. It's almost absolutely irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the point to where I'm not even going to argue it anymore with someone, whether or not atheism is, or any reductionist materialism, any of it, whether or not it holds merit. I mean, they're having to recalculate mathematical formulas in order to get basically our modern world to run, because they know once consciousness is involved that these formulas are not right.
Yeah, or that they require dimensions and numbers and tools and things that are outside of our ability to express. I mean, it's gonna be an obsolete language, I think, as things start to integrate more and more and more into each other. I I'm just I had some point I was trying to make and now it's just slipped away from me. Darn it. Um,
Oh, I hate
I
when
know.
that happens.
Don't you hate when that happens?
I do. I totally hate when that happens. Oh, it's such a bummer.
I know, and I was just thinking about it right there. Oh my gosh, what was it? I know we were talking about the weight of consciousness. We were talking. Oh yes, yes. I was wondering if looking at all of the different modes that go past focus 21, um, if a lot of the kind of things that we're seeing may be natural, kind of like a river, but how someone can manipulate something that's natural, i.e., like we manipulate bodies of water. It doesn't mean that we made the bodies of water or anything like that. And
Mm-hmm.
it just makes me think about the flow of consciousness and what we're seeing right now in our little broken fractal ever-present Orion arm existence right here. I'm not saying that I think this is going on everywhere, because I don't. I think that this part of existence that we're in right here is different to most. But I do think that because it is the rate of variance is so much lower here, and there's so much less going on here than in other places.
Mhm.
I think that it would be possible, even if it is a natural flow, for it to be manipulated by people who have gone far beyond Focus 21, whatever the latest cutting edge technology is, as far as the Gateway Project, or far beyond the Gateway Project, as we've seen now. There are programs stacked on top of programs that come after the Gateway Project, and I am wondering if something went awry here, or if it was supposed to be this way.
Right, and that's still the real question. And really the question, is if things went awry, or something else perhaps that is still natural, but there's still I still and let's get to that real quick. Why I think that there's a push now for all populations, all cohorts, all whatever you want to call it, all kinds of different people in terms of the way they think. Okay. We have us, who I think is pretty much ahead of the curve. And then we have obviously these CIA folks and the people that were dealing with these kinds of things in the 70s. They're like way obviously decades ahead of us. But I think in terms of being like a general, public that doesn't know anything, I think we're pretty much on the edge. But have you noticed, and I've been putting this on Twitter, and I talked about it on my recent episode of the Lizard Ritual, Forbes magazine in the past few days, they first put out the one that I talked about on the Lizard Ritual, the one article talking about paranormal phenomena, and it being, and Lanessa actually reminded me of that. Thank you for that, Lanessa. Paranormal phenomena being taken seriously and incorporating it into mainstream thinking. And I talked about particularly of a Forbes audience, captains of industry, people who are probably reductionists, people who are hardcore atheists, their materialism and corporatism and go, go, go. And you don't mean anything unless you can add to the bottom line. And that kind of really materialist thinking, and materialist and all around materialist in terms of material, and materialist in terms of like your soul. But Forbes now, they have been putting out the weirdest article, like this one that's titled from March 13th. What we think of as paranormal, maybe something else entirely. Actually, that's the one that I just I read on the Lizard Ritual, and I put the links to all the articles inside of the description here. Everybody, my favorite one is, and this is Forbes, people. This is Forbes. It says, are we in a galactic zoo protected by aliens? Scientists meet to investigate the Great Silence. That's a title from Forbes magazine. Okay. So, and then there's been other ones too with Forbes, and I only have two of the three, unfortunately, that I have pulled up, but I'm gonna find the other one too, because it says here, um the Fermi paradox. It addresses a contradiction in astronomy and can be summarized thus: if extraterrestrial life, and see, just the fact that they're expressing these kinds of kind of out there paradoxes and formulas. But anyway, if extraterrestrial life and even intelligent alien civilizations are not just likely but highly probable, then why have none of them been in contact with us? Are there biological or sociological explanations for this great silence? So they're actually bringing this up in Forbes, and this is the first time I've actually read this all the way through. I'm doing it now. But my point is actually broader than even whatever conclusions they come to. Forbes is not exactly like, sci-fi central. It's between that and us getting our hands on this declassified information from the CIA and the DoD, it just seems like there's been obviously a spiritual great awakening, but along with that, there seems to be this push by the powers that be to get this out. It's just the multiverse. You're gonna love this one, folks. This is why the multiverse must exist. That's the title from Forbes, and that one I got from Buster, and that was from what, March the 15th. Yeah, March the 15th. So all of this is coming out literally within days of each other. And people have talked about time speeding up, and I know biblically they talk about the quickening. So you've got all of these very esoteric and very spiritual things going on at one time. And I'm just trying to put it in some sort of coherent narrative, but it's happening so fast, Chick, I can't do it. What do you make of it?
I think it's very bizarre that they would be broaching subjects like this, because I think that, a few years ago, it would have been very much tinfoil hat, fringe, crazy talk. You know, it wouldn't be
Hmm.
something I would expect to see in Forbes, and now it is. And all these things are becoming more mainstream and more talked about, and it's a very strange time. And when I think about the whole flying saucers thing, or if that's what they're trying to allude to, which I presume it is, with saying that we might be a galactic zoo, which I don't know how I feel about that, but um, what I've heard different people talk about in the truther community for years was that it wasn't so much physical saucers, it was like DMT saucers that people would experience what we would recognize in pop culture as alien life if they were on some kind of wild spiritual journey or DMT thing. And there's a lot of different things alluding to that. So I wonder if it's a shift in perception more than an actual physical flying saucer landing down on us. I do remember very strange talks about different villages in Africa where they said that in the old days, everybody could see saucers flying all over the place, which was news to me, but I listened to this interview anyway. And they said when they started to get more modernized and they started to get heavy metals, ending up in their body, which happens to a lot of us. And, it's debatable how, but I think a lot of people would agree that that there are heavy metals in the modern person's body. And apparently the more of that there is, it kind of disrupts your antenna, it disrupts your perception. And the people who had the modern amenities couldn't see the saucers and couldn't see all the weird DMT stuff. And it's not, it started to become more mainstream then, I think. As I mentioned before, when Steven Spielberg, when Lucas and they were making the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I believe they talked to each other before they went and made the Indiana Jones movie, the fourth one.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all about weird DMT aliens, which is, very much a wild corner of the truther community for most of the time that it's been discussed, in at least in modern decades. And then somehow it became into the mainstream community. And I think that even if you're just on social media, you're going to see weird things being posted about people talking about this, more and more contact with some kind of other consciousness. And I don't know why it's happening. I think it's been prepped for a long, long time, because at least from what I've seen from the research, in the 1950s, most people didn't believe that there was other life or that there was saucers and things like that. And then by the time the 90s and the X-Files and everything was around, most people believed, oh yeah, it's a possibility that there's something else out there and there might be flying saucers. And that's a real shift in how people perceived reality.
But and what you that's a great point, talking about sort of that shift from the 1950s to the 1990s. But it almost seems as if it's been since 2012 that the final dam is broken, and the water is sort of filling up everything, because it's almost as if the final holdouts of that old idea, that pre-50s idea of, either being alone, or all of those kind of old ideas. I think in the last few years, it's in Forbes magazine, and they're talking about us being in a galactic zoo in Forbes magazine. So the last bit of the hardened population that is absolutely taking pride in being a skeptic, taking pride in being a materialist, taking pride in atheism, taking pride in all of those hardened, old scientific, outdated, by according to these documents, outdated views as late as early as 1979. Even that seems to be giving way now. And I'm reading this. It says here, just real quick, in this article, and this is Forbes now, this would be the last bastion of the most hardened anarcho-capitalist out there, that's betting on buy and sell of derivatives. And if I can buy a put to crush a company and thousands of people lose their jobs, as long as I make money, I don't care. This is that kind of ground. It says here, and that may be a gross generalization. It's probably unfair of me to say it that way, but I'm trying to illustrate a point. And I may have done it. That was a bit rude if someone, and I didn't mean to offend anybody if I said it that way. But my point is that these are hardcore people who read Forbes, and particularly people who are in the trading world are really hardcore about things like this. But anyway, I'll get to the magazine. Today, leading researchers from the fields of astrophysics, biology, sociology, psychology, and history are meeting. And it says, quote, every 2 years at the METI International, and METI stands for Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence, organizes a one-day workshop in Paris as part of a series of workshops entitled What is Life in Extraterrestrial Perspective? And Florence Rollin Corso, co-chair of the workshop and a member of METI, I guess you call it, board of directors, the scientists are discussing some pretty insane sounding questions. Bullet point 1, are extraterrestrials standing silent out of concern of how contact would impact humanity? Bullet point 2, do we live in a galactic zoo? Bullet point 3, should we send international radio messages to nearby stars to signal humanity's interest in joining the Galactic Club? Bullet point 4, will extraterrestrial intelligence be similar to human intelligence? And the final bullet point, did life get to Earth from elsewhere in the galaxy, interstellar migration? So, this is Forbes magazine. I mean, this is, and these kinds of things, like you said, in the 90s would have been relegated to the X-Files crowd, which is notably growing, but still would have been considered fringe. I don't know the difference anymore. It's so blurred in magazines like this. I don't know the difference between fringe and not fringe because of what I've been reading in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, what do you think? I don't know. What do you think?
That's what I find so weird about it, is that stuff that would be absolutely fringe, absolutely Alex Jones or David Icke or something even, wilder than that I haven't even heard about. That's where I would expect to find these kind of articles and these kind of ideas. And that's not where we're finding them. We're finding them like in the magazines for the business people who, are not interested unless they can make money off of the aliens or the DMT creatures or whatever they are. Like if those other consciousnesses have dollars, then they'd be interested. But for any other reason, why would they care? And it's bringing this world into that world, which is super duper strange for me. But I suppose anything goes in Orion. That they would even put up with that they wouldn't start saying, oh, that magazine is a rag, they're just printing crazy conspiracy stuff. That doesn't seem to be the case. I wonder if they are listening, or if they are on a subconscious level taking something in. And I look at this Orion Earth kind of place, and I am not, I've said it before, not any kind of expert on aliens, don't know really anything about aliens. I've heard people talk about it, but I don't understand the phenomena whatsoever. I'm not going to pretend like I do. But I from the amount of people who talk about the connection between other consciousness or having a different capability of perception when your natural levels of DMT are up, I would say that there probably isn't a great silence. It's probably going on, and the people who have immensely lower levels of natural DMT compared to what they would have had, years and years ago, or perhaps thousands of years ago, the modern person is just like, this is what I'm thinking. If this is what's going on, Spielberg and everyone else, if this is what's really going on, maybe it's just that the average person has such low levels of natural DMT that they don't see half of the world that they're walking around in, or maybe more than half of the world. Maybe their most average person is having like a very very disassociated, schizophrenic, like kind of broken, partitioned experience of life, and that they're not seeing the things that are going on. Because if you look at the Orion world or even other worlds layout, you'll see that there are strange points like Mount Shasta, the Bermuda Triangle, the Alaskan Bermuda Triangle, the Vile Vortex by Japan. Like there's all these weird magnetic points where reality bends out of its usual shape. And those places are said to be where these different consciousnesses come in and out, kind of like portals, almost as if the world is more fluid based than solid based.
Absolutely. And just so someone knows, if you, I don't know who's in the chat. If you're trying to promote products or anything like that, I'm gonna pull you from the chat. So I know there's a lot of new people in the chat, but I do without the mods, I'll do the best I can. But I'm not for promoting products, and if I'm just glancing at the chat, but I'm trying to make sure that nobody's being bullied. If anybody's being bullied, let me know as well. Not that that's happening. I'm just saying. But back to what you were saying, Chick. I do agree that You're right. We have to now, for some reason, i- within the last few weeks, we actually have to kind of, in a way, define what is this consciousness. It is all around us. And this DMT is something that is naturally inside of us, and that we have the low levels of it because of maybe metallic fallout from whatever it may be, or it also too can go back to what the original CIA document alludes to, is that reality, it comes from consciousness. And if we come into this reality with preconceived expectations of what it should be, that alone, our consciousness could be so sensitive that if you were to even make suggestions very early, like as soon as we're born, where we're immediately kind of told what reality and existence is, and we're sent through decades of school in order to make sure that we're all in line by the time that we become productive adults. And along with the fallout, and along with being in, we have this really narrow band, in the electromagnetic spectrum, where we can see. I truly feel as if sometimes we're not actually here. I am in a room somewhere else, and I am completely unable to truly, quote unquote, see, and that, I know that that sort of kind of goes back to the third eye thing. It goes back to a lot of new agey things, but I mean, everything I'm reading here points to those kinds of things. And yes, like you said, everything we're reading here, whether it's sort of those ancient stories like you were talking about, where it was all around us at one point, perhaps the fall, or these, all of these ancient traditions that talk about it, it indeed does go back to this idea of us coming into this world of material and matter, and that we've descended into this somehow, perhaps. And regardless of what tradition you come from, the final bit of it failing may have happened right around 1979-ish, or whenever these documents were starting to recognize and understand that this full-on, full-bore materialism is just not working, and it's just not real. And it's almost as if our descent into this material world, we got this first bounce sometime after World War II, and our ascent, our literal and our figurative ascent, has begun since then. And this document has these scientists and these DoD people and clandestine people and army people. They're the ones who started this ascent, and now it's getting to other segments of the world, and we're more sensitive perhaps in certain aspects, so we're starting to see it in a more intense way. But in a more popular way, other people are being drawn into these questions as well, as in the Forbes magazine. So you almost have these different segments, that are a part of this ascent, perhaps. And that's something I just thought about. But it seems to me to be, especially in the last few weeks, it's just gotten weirder and weirder.
For sure. And I think it's a possibility, and I don't know, but I'm just going to say I think it's a possibility that maybe we started to wake up, and that's why we couldn't continue to exist in the places we were originally from. I think that somehow we
Mm,
got out of vibrational sync with where we were from. We kind of ended up here.
mm,
That's one theory I have. I think that just two things I'd like to quickly comment on is, as far as the greater perception, I think that we all have it, but I think that it gets distorted in different fashions and with different parts of the brain that we use, depending on what kind of person you are and literally what parts of your brain are more lit up than other parts, and the capability and functionality of it also in line with where things are right now in existence, because they change at different cycles of time. Things are different, and we can see that from the histories and the things that are told and the stories that are passed down, kind of the difference of perception that people had. Almost as silly as going back to the days of Odysseus. Apparently they couldn't see the color blue, and that's why they'd always describe the oceans as green. And the ability
Wow.
to see the color blue came later, and that was a shift in perception, which, you know, is huge to me. That's my favorite color and I see it everywhere. But there was a time when it wasn't a thing, apparently, according to scientists and according to, you know, recollections, where you can't, most languages didn't have a word for blue. You couldn't find blue anywhere. And yeah, you don't need a word for color that wasn't around. So that's, I think, part of the madness of the limited perception. The ones who think they're the most rational are perhaps the ones that are projecting the hardest a room that probably isn't the room that they're sitting in, you know, and that in itself is kind of coming full circle of what exactly is the most rational way to perceive the world. I disagree with the, you know, reductive materialist, but that's just me. And the other thing I wanted to say was the artificial block on accessing our own memories. I think that when we sleep, a lot of our primary function opens back up, and that we probably perceive the world more the way it actually is. And that's why a lot of people don't have access to the memories of what they were doing, like what their consciousness was doing when they were asleep. And to me, it doesn't feel like, oh, I don't remember. It literally feels like there's an artificial block on some information. And I get the exact same feeling when a Mandela effect has happened. And in some situations, there will be an artificial block on the previous information that I knew that I had. And sometimes I can force my way through that block, and I can remember what it was before the Mandela effect changed it into something else, be it a logo or a country or something. Sometimes I can force my way through that block and retrieve that information, and sometimes I can't. I'm just hitting a wall. And I bet that there are other people experiencing the Mandela effect who realize that that's the exact same feeling when you can't force your way back into whatever you know you were doing when your consciousness was, you know, when you were asleep, and also when you're trying to get back to what the previous version of reality was to your memory, how sometimes you can recall it with no problem, and sometimes you have a little bit of a hurdle, and sometimes you have to force your way back through it to find it again.
That's interesting. And that could totally be a possibility. And I almost can feel that same thing as well, as if, you know, I have these blocks, and I think the blocks are much bigger than the way we think about mental blocks. I think there's something much bigger. And I think we as a species, as human beings, obviously there's a reason why flamenco, you know, found that missing 1,000 years. There's this need for history to be hidden, and our individual and our collective histories to be hidden. And I think that somehow we have these pieces of the puzzle, and they're all out there laid out for us, and we have to figure out a way to put them together. And I don't, you know, I tell you what, yeah. And Jeremy Crow, have you heard? The idea is that there's an entity trying to keep us in the hologram. Yeah, and this goes back to all of those, and I can't abandon those ideas anymore. Not that I ever did. I never abandoned those ideas anymore. The idea of Gnosticism, that there is a sort of evil God that runs this plane, and then there's the true God, and the idea that we're being forced into this kind of prison, and you know, all of these things just keep the science and everything there keeps pointing back to that, and it almost seems like clicking out in itself. Why it could be so dangerous is that you're violating that law. If this were to be that kind of Gnostic prison where we are stuck here, you know, and we're in a way, you know, going to our true home, and there could be it's dangerous. It's like an adventure, like almost like a Hobbit kind of adventure thing where it truly those things are actually allegories for what is really happening. And I've always contended that fiction is absolutely critical for us to understand subconsciously what is actually going on for us to develop a language to understand our reality. And I will not back away from that. I just feel that that is absolutely the truth. Yeah, the demiurge, all of those things. I absolutely am aware absolutely of all of those concepts. And I'm actually being drawn back into those things, those Gnostic concepts, because of what I'm actually reading. And those are great points, guys, that people are bringing up in the chat. But the one thing I wanted to read here, and I shouldn't be reading on the fly, but I'm just so excited about the new document. It says here, it's talking about the new science and information science, which is interesting because information science is obviously the blockchain because it's information technology, and information science is it's IT, and IT by another name. But anyway, it says here, it talks about Newton's mathematical principles of natural philosophy on the basis of the thesis of Newton avoided indicating the primary factors in gravity and pleaded that he could not but exclude um, something which permeates and is concealed within matter in general. That is the quote spirits of function and of quote consciousness. In fact, Newton is said to have tried but failed to develop a theory of gravity using a matterness ether, i.e., quote consciousness. My efforts over the last 10 years have been described as an attempt to introduce the quote consciousness parameter to the theories of modern physics and to perfect somewhat more our scientific understanding of the world. See, this is just as earth-shattering and as powerful as that original document. But because I'm not falling off my chair as I had that original document to prep me for what I'm reading, these scientists knew, and they know. And I don't know if it was a concerted effort. I mean, these are scientists back in the 70s saying these things. Was this a concerted effort for the general public just to be in ignorance and to think ignorantly that, you know, these things just aren't there? Or is it just, there wasn't the I don't know. It just none of this has been taught to us. I got to get Lenny on sometime, man. We got to get Lenny on, and we got to talk to him about, what does he know about this kind of stuff? I don't know. I'm not trained in this, so I don't know. But what I'm reading goes against everything that's the popular concept of what we know about science and the popular concepts that entire huge populations inside the Western thought. They're absolutely wrong in the way they think, according to some of these papers, and at least what the CIA is actually implementing and how they kind of run things.
I think that one of the things that we have to look at is how the people respond to this. As a lot of people will respond to it and absolutely just reject the Mandela effect, or even talk about any other kind of consciousness or perception or entities or spiritual world or anything like that. We have to remember that we're kind of in an integrated situation here where we seem to be independent consciousness, but we're still integrated with this system on some level because we're here. So we even need to watch our own natures and our own instincts about things, because most of it is us, but I believe that some of it is probably built in with this place too, as in we kind of have to navigate ourselves as well as this place, because I think if we were 100% free, we'd already be free of it. So I think while people want to say, okay, there's an entity that's keeping us here, and there very well could be, I think that there's a percentage of ourselves that wants to be here. And as long as we keep following that, we'll probably always be stuck here, not able to see the room that we're sitting in. And I think that eventually one scale is going to tip the other. And for me anyway, I'd rather see what's really going on, even if it's not as good or as comfortable as what isn't really going on. Because I'm not happy to just, be doing something that isn't the full story. Like, I really want to know what is going on even though they're probably that, a lot of people would probably just rather stay in the comfortable situation. And I'm trying to navigate around that because I don't think that we are 100% different, like I said, than the system that we're in, because we are still here. So there has to be some kind of part of the frequency that's resonating with this place.
I mean, I'm to the point where, I mean, Lenny brings up the idea, could schizophrenia be caused by unrecognized Mandela affected realities? I mean, at this point where they're trying to recalibrate the most basic mathematical calculations all the way back to like Newtonian physics and all these other things they're trying to recalibrate with, incorporating consciousness and knowing that, it's a fractal hologram. I think any of those kinds of concepts that are kind of outside the box, you can no longer call these things fringe. And I think the only thing that is being let go here is the grip on our minds of materialism and scientism. And that's different than science. I love science, but there's the corporate side of scientism. And that could be also why I just answered my own question, why there may have been a willful ignorance on the entire population, so that scientism and the idea of making money and the idea of maintaining power and the idea of all these things that come with the comforts of this material world, maintaining that power. And perhaps I'm answering my own question as I speak, is that's why there's this willful ignorance of the population. And then to avoid the karmic wreckage that comes from it, you do release the documents, and it takes 10, 15, 20, 30 years for people to find the documents. But all along they can say, well, they were out there. And even though we gave a lecture in 1979 saying that we basically understand consciousness has its own weight, and perhaps it is the 21 grams, that I just, I don't know. I know we're starting to get in some really funky people, and we are not my regulars, but we are over time. And I just had to hide. I've got to hide this. Someone put something in here I don't want in here. So yeah. Yeah. So you want to just jump off and call it, and we'll just just call it.
Yeah, just like thank you everybody for joining us here today. It's not our usual time, but it was just a darn good show anyway. And we won't be able to do the usual hours this week, but probably next week we'll be back to normal.
Yep, absolutely. And guys, it's free, it's easy. Please give us give both of us a thumbs up for this episode, please. I don't think, I don't think ME is part of that whole I know they're cracking down, and perhaps MEs are part of that crackdown, but I know there's been a very big difference in the way in which suggestions have been had just on my feed. I don't get the suggested videos like I used to. So, and I've noticed a big drop in, just different things with the channel. If you could give a thumbs up and help out, it would help me out. It's free. It's easy. It's just a click, and we'll be able to stay afloat and get to as many people as possible. The information we're trying to give out is authentic, to the point of I'm giving you links to original sources. And Chick and I do the best we can, and anybody I bring on, I to the best that I can vet people, that we try to give you the honestly what it is to be an ME and what it's like. And, I just, the clicks, somehow they help. I notice when people give more clicks, the videos get circulated more. And there could be an ME out there that's lost and doesn't understand what's going on. And they've gone beyond that first level of just pointing out that, yes, we get it. Things are different. Right. Let's, and they want more answers, and perhaps, they can come here and find a comfortable community full of great people like we have here. So if I could get those thumbs up, it would help out quite a bit. I appreciate that. Anything else, Chick?
I just had someone in the chat asking what our regular hours are, and I'm trying to type 11 a.m. and it won't let me. It's literally only letting me type 11. I don't know why.
That's okay. So, yeah, anybody, the Lost and Found bin, we are 2:00 Eastern time on Saturdays, and 11:00 West Coast, and everything in between. And then I do the Lizard Ritual on Truth Frequency Radio, at 5 o'clock on Sundays, which I won't be there this Sunday. However, they have an archive, a nice archive already built up there. As you can see, we're on episode 49. We're closing in on a year with Chick and I. And then I do shows whenever things pop up and just pop in my head and I can't shake them. So that's it. That's where we're at. So next week we'll be back on schedule, everybody.
Yep. Thank you for hanging out with us, everybody.
All right. And thank you very much. And we'll see you next week. Bye.